Okay. We negate. Contention 1 is ending ISIS once and for all. Burns 19 of AP News finds that the Islamic State has ambitions to regenerate and remains a dangerous threat in Iraq and beyond. US presence is important for counterterrorism in two ways. First is by creating stability. Carafella 19 of the ISW explains that currently, areas ISIS has lost in Iraq and Syria are neither stable nor secure. Importantly, Brands 15 of the US Army War College explains that terrorist groups prosper amid insecurity and stability vacuums. However, US presence helps, as COP 18 of the Military Times explains that US and coalition forces are involved in stabilization efforts, including resettling displaced Iraqi civilians and getting civilian infrastructure back up and running in cities that were devastated by ISIS. Brands continues that because withdrawal prevents these efforts, removal of American forces from a still unstable context would undercut previous counterterrorism gains and facilitate the insecurity in which jihadist organizations thrive. Second is by training Iraqi forces. Nowak of the Washington Post writes in January that American training and funding is responsible for the country's only counterterrorism force that is largely uncorrupt. However, if the US were to withdraw its troops from Iraq, the governmental counterterrorism force would likely merge with Iranian-backed militias, which would undermine their reputation and constitute a large blow to the Iraqi state. Feldscher corroborates that when the US left Iraq in 2011, Iraqi's military quickly deteriorated to the point where the Islamic State could grow in our absence. For these reasons, Carafella concludes that when ISIS seeks to reestablish its territorial control in Iraq, it will likely succeed if the US withdraws. There are two impacts of an ISIS resurgence. The first is civilian death. Jameson 16 of NBC warns that an ISIS resurgence could be deadlier in the past, which killed at least 18,800 civilians in Iraq alone in just 2 years. Second is refugees. The last time ISIS surged, they displaced millions of Iraqis with the damage still being felt. According to the New York Times a few months ago, 1.8 million Iraqis still remain internally displaced. Contention 2 is stopping yet another Middle Eastern war. Currently, Israel and Iran are sworn enemies, with Smith 19 of NBC News noting that Israel views Tehran as an existential threat. Luckily, US presence in the region has thus far kept Israel at bay, but affirming reverses this for two reasons. The first is nuclearization. Estione 19, professor at George Washington University, writes that if Iran faces no reactions to its provocations, it will expand its nuclear program since Tehran believes that our nukes are the best way to guarantee its national security and act as a proactive shield. This would be disastrous, as Farley 19 of the National Interest writes that if Iran were on the verge of nuclear weapons, Israel might well consider a preventative nuclear attack, as Israeli planners would no longer deem a conventional strike sufficiently lethal to delay the program. The second reason is abandonment. Harel in 2019 of Haaretz writes that Israel is scared by America's apparent desire to quit the region, as it would leave Iran with more room to maneuver. Horowitz 19 for the Times of Israel continues that the concern in Israel is that America's hands-off approach will encourage the Iranians to take action against Israel. This is harmful, as Horshig 19 of The Conversation writes that Israel is known to take aggressive preemptive action to protect itself, including launching preemptive strikes against neighboring nations it views as threatening. If international relations with Iran grow more volatile, Israel could take dramatic unilateral action, which she concludes Iran would surely retaliate against and trigger a region-wide conflict that spirals throughout the entirety of the Middle East. This would be disastrous and lead to war, as Oren of The Atlantic in 2019 writes that the conflagration can be lighted by just a single spark, and after a day of large-scale exchanges, the real war would begin, with the number of rockets raining down on Israel totaling 4,000 per day. Faced with thousands of casualties, Israel would surely deploy some of its nuclear arsenal in order to end the war early. This is disastrous, as Terse 13 of Mother Jones writes that a nuclear strike against Iran would kill 5.6 million people. Save lives and negate.
Okay, or actually, wait, I have the speech doc with the cards, so that's fine. I'll let you know when we want to start looking at them. Yeah, we're just pulling them up.
Cody, I got it. Let me know when you're ready.
Okay, yeah, I'll be ready in just a sec.
You good, bro?
Yeah, I'm good. Okay, start prep now. Okay, I'm good. Are you?
I'm good. Those 12 seconds.
Okay, yeah. Okay, cool. Ready for case? Excellent, then we'll begin. Max and I affirm in contention 1 is leaving on our own terms. As of April 2nd, Lawler and Wallace 20 of the ISW report Iran continues to escalate proxy attacks against the US and Iraq, demonstrating that it remains undeterred. These escalations will inevitably result in the US being forced out of Iraq for 2 reasons. First, backlash. FAF 20 of the Atlantic Council writes the current tit-for-tat between US forces and Iran-backed militias is unsustainable. With every exchange of fire, Iran is able to mobilize elements of the Iraqi population to demonstrate against the US presence. Wallace furthers, Iran and its proxies intend to bait the US into a harsh kinetic response that could alienate Iraqis who oppose Iran's efforts to expel the US. Iraqi politicians could soon conclude that the easiest mechanism to contain fallout is to compel the withdrawal of US forces rather than to curtail the proxy militias. Second, sovereignty. Wallace continues, Iraqis will likely perceive more aggressive US action against the proxies in Iraq to be further violations of Iraqi sovereignty. This could incentivize the Iraqi PM to end the executive agreement that allows U.S. troops to remain in Iraq. For these 2 reasons, Slavin 20 of the Atlantic Council writes that a U.S. exit from Iraq is now inevitable. Affirming now allows us to leave on our own terms, which is far better than being removed. As Fritz 20 of USA Today finds, President Donald Trump threatened to impose deep sanctions on Iraq if it moves to expel U.S. troops. However, if you affirm the resolution, the U.S. is not expelled, but rather elects to leave, sparing the Iraqi population from tragedy. Sanctions on Iraq have been horrific in the past, as Courtright 01 of The Nation finds. Studies on sanctions in Iraq estimated the number of excess deaths among children to be 227,000. Contention 2 is Iran war. The probability of a U.S.-Iran war is rapidly increasing as Powell 19 reports hawkish members of Trump's administration are attempting to use a connection between al-Qaeda and Iran to go to war, which under the AUMF may allow the White House to militarily confront Iran without congressional approval. War looks more certain now than ever. Mudede 20 writes, as of last week, that the U.S. is preparing for a war with Iran, with secret Pentagon directive orders for planning to try to destroy a militia group backed by Iran and U.S. military moving air defense systems. And Oliphant 20 furthers, there was an hour-long confrontation between Iranian boats and U.S. ships literally 2 days ago. War is uniquely likely now for 3 reasons. First, coronavirus. K20 writes that both sides may be tempted to view the crisis as an opportunity to double down, with Trump attempting to capitalize on Iran's increased vulnerability and Iran seeing it as an opportunity to attack American forces with less risk of retaliation and deflect domestic criticism. Second, Mazzetti 20 writes that U.S. intelligence believes Iran is currently planning a large-scale attack against U.S. troops. Third, Dreyfus 19 explains that war against Iran could set off an explosion of MAGA-style jingoism among Trump's supporters that would make the president's misrule swamped by war fever come election season. War with Fernandez 20 also writes that Trump predicted Obama would start a war with Iran to get reelected. Luckily, affirming makes war impossible for 2 reasons. First, removing the large military presence necessary to go to war. Rogan 19 finds war would specifically require an extremely large air and naval buildup in the Persian Gulf and a massive ground deployment in Saudi Arabia, as none of Iran's neighbors would likely allow U.S. invasion forces access. Second, changing Iran's calculus. Jones 11 explains that surrounding Iran has strengthened hardliners and convinced them that the best path to self-preservation is through violent resistance. However, Fontenrose 20 writes that Iran has floated a plan that would give GCC countries the peace of mind they're looking for, but in exchange for U.S. withdrawal from the region. War would be a disaster. Spinelli 19 finds it by necessity would have to involve Iran's regional neighbors and adversaries, destabilizing the whole region for years. Afr Saibi 19 finds there is a heightened possibility of a U.S.-Iran war triggering a U.S. nuclear strike, as Trump has a cavalier attitude towards nukes and would want a speedy end to such a war. Even a small nuclear war would be catastrophic, as Witch 20 writes, a war involving less than 1% of the world's nuclear arsenal could shatter the planet's food supplies. Okay, Hawken, are you all ready for cross?
Yeah, Zane just gonna like call evidence or like take the time to like go find it in your case.
Can I see the Afrasiabi evidence? Trump would turn to nukes.
Sure, yeah.
It's in the case. You can just Control F it because we sent it to you. But if you want us to just send it in the email chain, that's fine as well.
Email chain's preferable because this one wasn't in the email you sent.
Okay.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll send it over.
Okay.
So do you want to see any cards other than Afra Saibi?
I'm double checking.
Okay, cool.
Grant, do you want anything?
I'm good.
Cool. Oh, one other thing. Could I see the hour-long confrontation?
Yeah, sure.
Cool.
Max, can you get that one?
I got Afra Saibi.
Oh, okay. I'll get the hour-long one then. That's fine.
Okay, sent. Oh, never mind. I just replied instead of reply all, so I'll send it again. So that the judges can get it too. Okay, I sent it again.
Yeah, and the hour-long confrontation is sent too.
Okay. Taking prep, starting. Okay, that was time. 24 seconds. I'm ready for cross.
Sorry, I was muted. I'm good.
Cool. All right. So on the evidence you handed me, you said that there was this hour-long confrontation. What did that actually look like?
Oh, there were high tensions, like the ships were, or here. There were dangerous and there were accusations of Iranian naval forces carrying out dangerous and harassing maneuvers, and then the U.S. Like ships interdicted, and like there was just a confrontation.
And how did the U.S. respond?
The U.S. Fifth Fleet sent or said.
Not what they said, what they actually did. Like, did the U.S. respond militarily? Did we shoot at their ships? Any actual military confrontation?
Yeah, not necessarily, but the card specifically says that fears are growing of a new confrontation in the Persian Gulf in light of that confrontation, in light of that incident, and also you drop the Mudede evidence that we read that says that like we're literally preparing for war right now.
I didn't drop anything because it's crossfire.
Okay, fine.
Just to like clarify though, your uniqueness evidence for tensions being high is the fact that Iranian ships were like too close to American ships and didn't respond to their radio signals, right?
Well, that is merely just a card to bolster the narrative. That is not the entirety of the uniqueness evidence.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, yeah. So when I look at your case, your Etzoni card, which says that Iran is going to nuclearize, says if Iran faces no forceful reactions to its provocations, then sooner or later it will expand its nuclear program. But then later in the case, I see this Horshig card that says that Israel is known to take aggressive preventative action to prevent itself or protect itself, including by launching preemptive strikes on neighboring nations it perceives as threatening. So why wouldn't that qualify as a forceful reaction to Iran's provocations and to its nuclearization?
Oh, so you're saying if Iran were to nuclearize, wouldn't Israel attack?
I'm saying yes, the Etzoni evidence seems to be
Yeah,
contingent on them not being attacked, but then later you say they're going to get attacked.
The Etzioni. We're fine with saying Israel has any sort of attack on Iran because the Oren evidence concludes this would lead to all-out war. But even further still, we'd say that nuclearization does trigger because of the Farley evidence right below Etzioni. Like Farley's very explicit in saying that Israel would use a preemptive nuclear attack to destroy Iranian nuclear facilities.
Yeah. Let's, if we're postulating then that's true, then that seems like the Etzioni card would then be taken out because it's contingent on Iran facing no forceful reactions to its provocations and to nuclearizing, and that it seems like that would be a very forceful reaction.
I don't think that
strike.
The timeline's kind of weird though, because the Etzioni evidence only happens before Iran starts to nuclearize at all. The Farley evidence happens once Iran starts to nuclearize because there's no provocations. Very quick question at the end of Cross. Where are US troops stationed right now in Iraq? Is it Baghdad or have they moved out?
I mean, there are lots of, there's currently like a consolidation effort where like we're consolidating more to Kurdistan, but like there are a lot of bases in the country. Okay.
Do you have evidence saying they're still in Baghdad or like anywhere other than Kurdistan?
Or I mean, I'm pretty sure they are. Like I don't have a card handy, but yeah.
It's chill. I can just Google during rebuttal or something.
We'll take like 2 seconds of prep.
That was 15.
So it'll just be down, just like down their case, just like pretty simple. Okay. Is everyone good? And is like my mic fine? Cool.
Yeah, good.
Dope. Okay. On the top, our contentions come first. First on the C1, Moral 15 of Time explains that because of ISIS expansion's nature is a threat to the stability of the entire Middle East, putting the territorial integrity of both Iraq and Syria at risk. Further collapse of either or both of these states could easily spread throughout the region, bringing with it sectarian religious strife. At that point, we would say that instability is caused if you don't stop ISIS, which probably triggers all their impacts. Secondly, our C2 outweighs because we say one, magnitude is pretty simple, but two, if Israel-Iran war happens, it destabilizes the entire Middle East. Go to their case, first start on Iraq. At the top, their argument simply isn't true. Right now, like anti-US sentiment isn't causing any protests. Instead, Cordon 20 of CSIS explains the major protests are anti-governmental, rooted in like the distrust of the Iraqi political system. At that point, their argument's clearly not true. Specifically on their first warrant where they talk about backlash, their argument relies on the US retaliating, but that won't happen because the US uniquely avoids casualty. Cooper 20 finds that Trump responded to attacks on US troops with attacks on like militias depots, which didn't cause any casualties at all. Trump's purposely avoiding casualties. But secondly, we would say that on their second warrant, when they talk about sovereignty, the strike on Salamanti is like the ultimate violation of sovereignty. Their impact should have triggered it. Secondly, at the bottom on their link, Iraq will never actually want to kick the United States out because Omar 20 finds Iraqi politicians don't want to risk sanctions because it would cut off oil revenues that generate kickbacks for political parties, and sanctions would disrupt the government payroll, which would lead to widespread protests across all regions of Iraq, including Sunni and Kurdish regions that remain quiet in the quo. That fact alone means that Iraqi politicians will never risk it. But secondly, even if they do, their link scenario on sanctions doesn't happen because Omar 20 of Inside Arabia furthers that the US won't want to impose sanctions because all of their policy objectives in Iraq would be severely undermined, like preventing the rise of terrorist organizations. Go to their C2. First, their uniqueness evidence is like really, really bad. The first thing is talking about like ships, and just because they go near each other doesn't mean war is inevitable. Second, on the Mudede evidence is talking about like destroying a militia. One, we'd say destroying a militia isn't war with Iran, but two, it doesn't even matter because Ryan's 20 says that right now US troops are moving towards like Kurdistan and away from militias. Clearly, we're not doing that. At that point, the alternative is way worse because Detmer 20 finds that Iran will try to expand into Iraq as soon as the United States leaves. As Iran views control of Iraq as critical to survival, as Iraq serves as an economic lung that helps alleviate the impact of sanctions and a crucial logistical supply link that links Iran to the Assad regime and Hezbollah. For this reason, Iran will never give up on fighting for Iraq. However, voting pro ensures Iran controls Iraq. Middle 19 finds that U.S. counter influence is critical in maintaining control over Iraq. For this reason, Jihad 20, the war on Iraq, explains that a U.S. withdrawal allows Iran to gain increasingly vast amounts of influence in Iraq. This is bad for 2 reasons. First, Jihad continues that increased Iranian influence in Iraq would lead American hawks to treat Iraq as an enemy and push Trump towards sanctions. That's bad because 1, it non-units their C1, but 2, we agree it causes 227,000 children deaths. Second is establishing the crescent. Conable 20 of Miami Herald writes that the so-called Shia crescent stretching from Iran through Iraq would be formed as soon as Iran takes control of Iraq, which is really bad because Oxford continues that this geographic block of like-minded politics would challenge the status quo pro-Western Sunni dominance in the Middle East and could have a cascading effect in the region, causing Shia and Sunni tensions to reemerge, which is really bad because that destabilizes the entire Middle East and causes an increase in chance of war. On their first warrant, or general on Iran war inevitable, that's not true. Cooper 20 finds that right now Trump has very little appetite for actually having a war. On their first one, where they talk about coronavirus, this literally doesn't mean a war will happen. It doesn't make any sense. On their second thing about planning an attack, Iran planning an attack, this isn't true because, again, the U.S. is moving their troops away from Iranian militias. They literally can't attack. Third, on their politics thing, Bernstein 20 Bloomberg finds that confronting won't actually cause a rally effect because the thing that really matters is having out-of-party support or when a rally effect happens, but Democrats will always dislike what Trump does, so it doesn't matter. And even Republicans don't like it either because even Tucker Carlson was saying it was bad when Trump killed Soleimani. On the bottom, we would say they don't even tell you how this war actually sparks. They don't say what happens. Even if it's a lethal retaliation, Hart 20 finds that you can use lethal force to establish a red line violations while still avoiding escalations and lowering tensions. Briefly on their second warrant on the bottom where they talk about diplomacy, it doesn't matter because diplomacy will still be avoided because their evidence says that any U.S. influence gets rid of it. U.S. president will still have presence through things like sanctions. But secondly, we would say Iran still goes into Iraq, which probably short circuits any efforts at diplomacy with Saudi Arabia.
Okay, can I see a few pieces of evidence? First about the Iran expanding into Iraq, and something about pushing Trump towards sanctions.
Yeah, sure.
And the Cooper evidence.
Yeah. On Iran controls Iraq, do you want the card that says why they care about Iraq, or do you want the card that says they'll do it?
They'll do it if US leaves. Just the evidence.
Yeah, sure. I just sent stuff. I think that's sufficient. If you want anything else, tell me.
Okay, I'll let you know when I get it. Okay.
Here, I haven't gotten it yet, so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let me know when you're good. Oh wait, also that U.S. troops are going to Kurdistan or whatever.
Yeah, sure. I sent it. So just whenever you get it.
Oh yeah, I'll let you know. Okay, cool. I just got it.
Okay, then we'll start prep, starting now. Okay, that was 6 seconds. I'm gonna call Teddy, and then we're gonna take prep time when he picks it. I'll let you know.
I just picked up, starting now. Okay, we used about 50 seconds. So 55 total. Or wait, now, because I called for the cards earlier, 110.
Okay. I am going to start on our C2, and then I'm going to go to all way against their case, and then I'll go to their case. Is everyone ready? U.S.-Iran war is imminent. Our Mudarid evidence says the U.S. is preparing for war with Iran. Their first two responses about uniqueness just don't apply because our Mudarid evidence specifically says that the U.S. is preparing for a war with Iran right now, and we give you the warrants as to why war is uniquely likely. Then they say the U.S. troops are moving into Kurdistan, but no, their evidence says they're moving into Kurdistan and Baghdad, which is closer to Iran. Then they say that Iran will expand into Iraq. No, no, they don't respond to the second warrant where we say from our Jones evidence who says that ultimately the reason why Iranian hardliners are empowered right now is because of U.S. presence, and it creates a scapegoat for them to blame, and they specifically provoke U.S. military presence to rally around their flag, which is what they did in response to massive protests in November after the Soleimani, before the Soleimani killing. Then they say that Trump has very little appetite for war. No, our evidence postdates this. It says the U.S. is preparing for war with Iran. It's not just Trump, it's also the Pentagon. Then they say that COVID doesn't make sense. Yes, it does. Our K evidence gives the warrant. It says that the U.S. wants to capitalize on Iranian vulnerability right now, and also Iran needs to distract from political problems, so it needs to start a war. Then they say, basically drop our second warrant about how U.S. intelligence thinks that Iran is going to launch a massive attack on U.S. troops. They just say that, U.S. troops are moving out of Iraq and it's not moving closer. That's not true. Our Mudared evidence is just much better on this. And they say that Trump can't get outside support because it's outside support is more important. But no, one, MAGA won Trump 2016. It was based on turnout, not outside support. Second, Trump perceives that he can win the election if he goes to war with Iran, which is ultimately more specific to his own perception, which is why he would do it. Then they say that we don't say what happens during a war. Yes, we do. Our offer evidence says that U.S.-Iran war will uniquely go nuclear because of Trump's erraticness, and he wants to end the war before the election. Then they say diplomacy doesn't matter. Our argument isn't about diplomacy. Even if there isn't diplomacy in a world in which we withdraw troops, there's still no U.S.-Iran war, which means that we still solve back because, one, you prevent the U.S. Military from being able to strike Iran, and two, you don't get hardliners in Iran. This outweighs their case for three reasons, on magnitude for three reasons. First, the U.S. is the largest military in the world, so it'd be the most deadly. Second, Trump has an incentive to withdraw really vigorously because he has an incentive to finish up before the election. And third, our Spinelli evidence says they would pull in the entire region because of U.S. security commitments. It outweighs their analysis because their analysis is uncarded, whereas ours is. Let's go to their case. On their contention, what about ISIS? There are three turns here. First, Chisel 20 explains that withdrawal would reduce anti-Americanism and remove a key source of tension with the West. Act 17 reports that U.S. military presence is ISIL's main recruiting tool. If we withdraw, we remove their recruitment. Second, Parsi 20 explains that U.S. protection of Saudi Arabia enables to promote terrorism. Brennan Camp 20 explains that Saudi Arabia arms jihadist groups across the Middle East and funnels money to ISIS. This outweighs ISIS specifically because it's about all terror groups in the Middle East. And finally, Fifth 16 writes that the U.S. trains paramilitary groups to fight terrorism that are actually terrorist groups themselves. So ultimately, even if we beat back ISIS, we still end up with a bunch of other terror groups which are even worse. Go to contention 2. First two turns at the top from Tisdall, who explains that one, withdrawal would delegitimize Israel's nationalist hard right and pave the way for a centrist coalition prepared to make equitable peace with Palestine, de-escalating tensions. This is important because ultimately the Israeli hard right is the only one that wants to strike Iran. For a second, Tisdall furthers that the Israeli lobby in Congress to guarantee any troop withdrawal would be accompanied by more U.S. security guarantees for Israel, including a mutual defense treaty, which gives the U.S. a veto over Israeli action, which ultimately means that ultimately the U.S. would veto any Israeli first strike. But third, Ms. Okami explains that Israel's submarines give it guaranteed second strike capability because they can't be destroyed by enemy nukes. So even if Iran nuclearizes, it won't feel insecure. Then go to Iran nuclearization. It's not unique. Acts 20 writes that Iran is rapidly expanding uranium enrichment in violation of the nuclear deal and could acquire a nuclear bomb in 1 year. Then go to the second warrant about emboldening Iran. There are three competing warrants which are much better than theirs. First, Moscow 16 reports that Iran's posture is defensive. It doesn't seek regional hegemony, but builds up to deter U.S. aggression. Nihaz 19 explains that Iran's support for proxies is rooted from its systemic insecurity. Once you get rid of that insecurity, it's better. Second, Daniels 18 explains that China and Russia use Iran as a lever to balance against the U.S. Once you remove the U.S., it goes away. And third, Ashkar 20 explains that hardliners in Iran intentionally provoke U.S. military action, which ultimately is what gives them their legitimacy in the first place.
Could I see the insecurity evidence on the first reason for A2, second contention, second warrant on abandonment?
Yeah. I sent them 15 seconds ago, so you should get it soon.
All right, cool. I just got it, so Zane will probably get it soon. Are you good for cross?
Yeah, I'm good. You
Alright,
have
one
the first question.
Let me just. Oh wait, there is. Okay, never mind. Zane wants to call one more thing.
The moderate evidence?
Zane, that's at the bottom of the case they
did
sent
it.
us. Just
Yeah,
it's in the case.
it's in it.
I was gonna talk about it in cross anyway. Okay, are you good?
I'm good.
Okay, so let's talk about like your main uniqueness evidence, which is like the mu data evidence. So your evidence says the United States is preparing for war. Then it cites like three things. The first thing it says is that they're trying to destroy a militia group backed by Iran. The second thing it says is that Iran's attacking. And the third thing it says is that we like moved Patriot defense systems. Can't literally all of these be explained by the one thing that the United States is moving our troops away in a defensive posture?
No, because why else would we like make military preparations?
Yeah, but my point is
Like
all
your
of the
card
military
that the U.S. is
preparations are
moving
defensive.
towards a defensive posture is really bad. It says that it's moving into both Kurdistan and Baghdad, which is closer to Iran.
No, but like the point is that we're moving troops away from where the Iraqi or the Iranian militias are. They're mostly in like the east.
Wait, Baghdad is in the east, I'm pretty sure. I don't know.
I'm pretty sure it's
I
like
can
towards
probably
the
check Google
center.
Maps after, but yeah, can I get a question?
Sure.
So you say that, like, okay, so you say that diplomacy doesn't matter at the bottom of your rebuttal, like.
Yeah,
What?
so okay, wait. So I was responding to like the thing where you talk about like peaceful negotiations, like the Jones evidence.
Oh, I don't think that's the Jones evidence. The Jones evidence just says that Iranian hardliners will lose their legitimacy if we pull out. Is it the Fontaine-Rose evidence?
Yeah,
like,
yeah, or the
why does
evidence.
Why does Iran making peace with Saudi Arabia not matter?
No, so okay, so the response I made is that one, Iran won't be willing to negotiate anyway because the United States still has pressure through like sanctions and stuff. And then secondly, even if they want to make peace, Saudi Arabia doesn't because Iran's going into Iraq. Okay, I had a question.
Sure.
Okay, on our second contention, second warrant, the second piece of evidence you cite says that like Iran feels insecure. What does the next sentence of that evidence say?
I can probably read it for you.
Yeah. So it says that it's insecure that like Saudi Arabia spends like 4 times as much on their military. So one, doesn't this mean that like your Iran is defensive thing not make it not true? And then two, doesn't it like prove our argument that like they want to go into Iraq and that Iran's aggressive?
Yeah,
isn't
the
that
warrant
conceded?
the warrant the article gives for that is just like Saudi Arabia, but most of Iran's power is concentrated in like proxies. So it doesn't really matter what the conventional.
Sure, but like
military
my
is.
point is that your evidence says that the only reason Iran is like insecure is because Saudi Arabia spends so much, which is obviously non-unique, so they're going to be aggressive anyway. Right?
I mean, like it doesn't.
I feel like your
matter
evidence
what
concedes
Saudi
that.
Arabia sends, but yeah.
right, cool.
No. The second piece of evidence just says that like Iran is insecure. Like insecurity is why it lashes out, and our first piece of evidence says that the U.S. is particularly like the primary reason.
Sure, but the first piece of evidence you say explicitly says they're insecure because Saudi Arabia spends way more. Like you sent it to Zane.
Okay, that's fine.
All right. We're gonna take prep starting whenever we get our timer up.
One last thing, because I didn't like flow it super well or whatever. What was the turn second contention from Tisdale? Withdrawals about moderates in Israel?
Oh, it's like U.S. withdrawal will delegitimize the hardliners in Israel and cause the moderates to rise to power. Do you want the evidence?
Do we?
No, it's fine.
No, we're good. Okay, and that we'll start prep now.
Wanda, when we're prepping, can you send over that last email? I didn't receive it.
Oh, what evidence was included in it? Just so that we can.
Whatever the last email you sent, just forward it to me.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, oh, sorry, I did not press reply all again. My bad. Okay. I'll forward it. Okay, I just sent it. You should get it soon.
Okay, so that was 203 more. Plus the 39 from earlier is 42, so 18 left. Before I took my headphones off, I heard some evidence calls from the judges. Do they still want to see that, or have they gotten it, or?
It was just that Max sent an email that accidentally didn't go to some of the judges. That was all, I think.
Yeah, press reply to you only.
Gotcha. And then, have they gotten it, or?
Yeah, they got it.
Okay, perfect. I'll be starting with their case first. Second contention, obviously, and then just mirroring his rebuttal. Okay, everyone good? So at the top, they say war is inevitable. We disagree. There's two conflicting pieces of evidence. The Cooper evidence we read is very specific. Oh, wait, sorry.
Yeah, you can start over. Sorry, I jumped out. That's what we got to ask.
My bad.
Yep.
Okay. At this point, is everyone ready? Gabe, can I get a nod or a? Cool.
Yeah, I'm good.
Nothing's changed with anyone else, right? Cool. On their second contention, they say war is inevitable. We disagree. There's two competing pieces of evidence. The first is our Cooper evidence. What it finds is that there is zero political appetite within the Trump administration for a war. This is very specific to the executive branch who has like the AMF stuff that they talk about and the ones that can cause the war. Insofar as they don't want it and the evidence is very explicit about that, it's not going to happen. Their evidence is from the Mudadi guy, but there's a couple problems here. The first is that sure, even if it postdates, every single thing that he talks about, the three things of like moving all these Patriot systems can be easily explained by a defensive posture from Baghdad. The second reason this is from the United States. The second reason this is incredibly problematic is because it's moving it away from the areas where the Shia militias are and towards more secure areas like Baghdad and Kurdistan, once again, preparing for not war, but instead peaceful de-escalation. The second thing that's incredibly important is the very mishandled Denver evidence. What it finds is that Iran needs Iraq in order to survive sanctions. The only response they say is, oh no, the United States actually emboldens Iran because of our presence there. But survival comes before politics. It doesn't matter how emboldened they are or how emboldened they will always be. The root, what will always come first is their ability to economically survive the sanctions. That's why the Middleton evidence concludes. The United States and the status quo are deterring Iran from invading Iraq, but Jihad finds that Iranian influence will only increase in Iraq if the United States pulls out. There's two implications. One, Jihad finds that once the United States views Iraq similar to Iran, once they have this like political takeover, we're going to sanction them all the same. This destabilization will easily kill 200,000 people as per their first contention. The evidence impact is conceded. The second reason this is bad is the Shia crescent implication. What we find is that it will challenge the status quo pro-Sunni Middle East and lead to like widespread Sunni-Shia conflict as it's part of Iran's Shia crescent strategy. The reason this is important is because it outweighs on their argument on magnitude and scope insofar as it's like a much larger impact overall, not just one region. At the bottom, they say that Trump's MAGA 2020 thing is like perceptual or whatever. Trump watches Fox News. Tucker Carlson said it was a really bad idea to kill Soleimani. If you think Trump's that dumb, then he'll just listen to the news there. On the top of our first contention, we concede the weighing that security commitments necessarily means Israel will, and Israel war would draw on the United States as well. On the terror stuff, group it all of it's outweighed if a nuclear strike kills 6 million people. Go to our second contention. They give you three terms from Tisdale. The first that it emboldens, it legitimizes moderates. That's not true. It would definitely embolden hardliners insofar as they'll be insecure. The second term they give is that more security guarantees. That doesn't make sense. If the United States pulls out, they're obviously going to view the US as like moving away from them. They're not going to sign over more of their military to them. The third thing they say is that the second strike is really bad, but our arguments about a preemptive strike, that's why it doesn't happen. Then they talk about how the United States is giving them security in the status quo. This is descriptive, not prescriptive. If the US pulls out, the opposite happens. They've conceded the Smith evidence, which finds that Israel views Tehran as an existential threat, which is why they have the incentive to bomb them. On their first reason why no preemptive strike happens in the first place, this evidence is very specific in saying it's about the insecurity that Iran feels, which has to do with the fact about Saudi Arabia. This means that insofar as Saudi Arabia will always be in the region and always have more military spending, that's why their argument about Iran is non-unique. And so far as actually extend the Horowitz evidence, which finds that the concern in Israel is that when the United States pulls off, this is going to lead to Iran Israel believes that Iran will attack them, which will lead to this all-out war killing 6 million people. Thus negate.
Okay, I'm gonna call Max and we'll start prep when we get on the phone. Okay, we just got on the phone. Start prepping.
Oh, pause prep. Can we see the Iran needs Iraq for survival?
Yep. Okay, I just sent it over, so it should be good.
35 seconds. Okay, I'll let you know when I get it. Okay, Teddy, are you good?
Yeah, I just got it.
Okay, we'll start prep now. Okay, that was 10 seconds. We're gonna call again. We've used 105 plus 35, which means
140 max.
140 plus 10 from, so 150. We have 110 left. We'll use that now. Okay, starting prep.
No, they don't.
Yes, they do. They do it in rebuttal. Okay, that's tough.
Whatever.
How much rep do y'all have left?
I think we have none. I think we've used it all. Okay, so it's going to be our second contention and frontlining it and weighing. Then their case and the turns and the drop responses. Cool? Is everyone ready? Okay, excellent. We're going for contention 2. War with Iran is imminent. The extremely recent Mudede card says the U.S. is literally preparing as we speak as Trump wants to rally around the flag and to take advantage of Iran's current weakness, and Iran wants to distract the population from corona. Luckily, our first warrant explains that Trump needs a Gulf presence to engage with Iran's navy and invade on the ground, so without one, war is impossible, and our second warrant explains that Iran only feels threatened by our presence, and Fontenrose writes they've literally proposed a peace deal if we withdraw. That's critical because Spinelli explains war withdrawn and destabilize the whole region, and Afra Saibi says that Trump would turn to nukes in hopes of ending it quickly, which Witt says could destroy the global food supply. They extend 3 responses. First of all, they extend this Cooper evidence that says that there's little appetite for war. First of all, that's just what the American officials are saying. Our evidence actually psychoanalyzes Trump and says that he personally has incentives to go to war, even if like the military officials around him aren't saying that. Second of all, our evidence is going to post-date and we explain why Trump actually has incentives to go to war. Then on the so they say that the Mudede evidence is consistent with with the U.S. actually taking defensive positions. Here, it's the military analysis of Hawken E.G., 2 high schoolers, versus the military analysis of Mudede. I'd say that you'd very much prefer the Mudede analysis. Also, we tell you that the naval confrontation literally happened, like Trump is ramping up and preparing for war. He struck Soleimani, like all of his actions are consistent with this. Then they say that they extend the sanctions response. However, what they drop here is they never contest the critical Jones card, which says that the hardliners in Iran specifically get their legitimacy from the U.S. And also Max reads the Matsuyuki card in response to their case about how they're actually defensive realists in rebuttal, never responded to that, takes that out. Also, second of all, history disproves this because Iran has escalated even in the face of sanctions. And so even if like they have a survival, and so they actually see their survival as chained to the fact that like they can escalate and like paint the U.S. as a villain rather than the economic damage caused by sanctions. Okay, they drop all of the weighing as to why this nuclear war is uniquely bad. It's a more probable link for 3 reasons. First, it isn't some nightmare scenario concocted by a sensationalist writer. It's happening right now. Second, because the actors in our scenario have actual incentives to do what they're doing. Iran would never build a nuke if it thinks Israel will destroy it and kill 5.5 million people in Tehran on top of that, which their own Etzioni evidence concedes. In our scenario, Afra Saibi explains Trump has an incentive to use nukes to end the war quickly. And third, even if you don't buy the stuff about how Iran wouldn't nuclearize, Iran simply doesn't then rocket Israel if it thinks it'll get nuked for it. In our scenario, Iran doesn't deter the U.S. and Trump's a more rational actor. Even if you don't buy any of that, they don't respond to the weighing that Max does in rebuttal about how war involving America will always be more destructive because we have the world's most powerful army. Trump has an incentive to fight mercilessly and the entire region gets pulled in. Then they also drop a lot of defense. They drop the Tisdale evidence about how you delegitimize the hard right in Iran. They just say that it's not true, but they don't provide a card. Also, they drop the really critical Tisdale evidence about how we're going to have a defense treaty with Israel. If their link is that Israel feels insecure, of course they're going to want a defense treaty. That'd be excellent. And then you short circuit their entire impact from happening. Also, they drop the terrorism turns and they read weighing in rebuttal as to why terrorism's really, really bad. And so that's another way that you can vote for us if nuke war gets muddled.
Ready for cross?
Yep.
Okay. Starting now. So y'all say that Charles Mudede is like some like expert on like Iranian politics, right?
Probably more of an expert than we are.
Sure. So I clicked your link. It's from some organization called The Stranger, which is probably a blog I've never heard of. And it says Charles Mudede, who writes about films, books, music, and her life in Rhodesia, Zimbabwe, and the USA. What the hell does she know about Iranian politics? And why should we trust her over me? I've done many hours of research on this topic, I will tell you. Hello?
Yeah, we're here.
If she writes about music, books, and culture, what does she know about Iranian and American geopolitics?
Like we'd say that again, like just the other actions that the US is taking are consistent with war. And also,
Okay, so if you want to appeal to authority with Mudede for some reason,
Like-
that's chill.
like-
But if you want
wait,
to talk
wait,
about the
wait.
logic, then we can engage there too.
wait, but yeah, like we have this weird geography discussion in second rebuttal, but like I don't know where we're going with this.
I'm just saying your card is very unreliable, and your like analysis that I know less than her is probably false. But even if we don't want to buy that assumption, let's go to the logical level. If the United States
Yeah,
is
like,
doing
there's
all of
still
these
structural
defensive
reasons.
postures,
We
to
just
the war.
asked you that. Okay.
if the US is taking all of these defensive postures, like moving them away from Shia militias, how are we preparing for war?
Like, the U.S. isn't taking defensive postures, though. Like, your evidence that says the U.S. is taking defensive postures is just the U.S. is moving towards Kurdistan and away from Iranian militias. But your evidence also says, and this is something that we've been saying throughout the whole round, that the U.S. is also consolidating its military in Baghdad.
Yeah, but the point is it's consolidating forces away from where Iranian militias are.
Where are Iranian militias? How do you know where they are? Do you have a piece of evidence that
I'm
says they're
fairly
not
certain they're not in Baghdad and they're not in Kurdistan.
Wait, hold the presses. A high schooler is fairly certain that the U.S. is moving away. It's like seriously, do you really think that like you're gonna win the round on analysis that you're like fairly certain on and it's not carded?
A bunch of other like authors saying like the U.S. has an incentive to start war now because it's perceived like we do read evidence that says the U.S. to start war now because it perceives Iran as weak because of the coronavirus. Like we read all this evidence that's like analyzing the incentives of the United States and Iran.
We're not going to agree here.
And you like don't respond to any of that.
Can I get a different question? Sure.
So on this Israel point, right?
Mm-hmm.
You said that there won't be U.S. security guarantees. Why not? Why is that incompatible with troop?
So two things. One, security guarantees are non-unique. Our link is perceptual about Israel. Two, this like increased security guarantees doesn't make any sense because Israel's not going to sign over their military with a veto if the United States just prove that they're going to dip from the region. And then this.
Wait.
That was the front line to the Tisdale turn. We're 15 seconds over.
Okay.
We have 18 seconds left. Okay, starting.
Okay. It's just going to be straight down there, my case, and then straight down their case. Okay, is everyone good? Okay, cool. Actually, I'll start on their weighing real quick. All right, everyone good? Okay, cool. Briefly on their weighing about war, an Israel-Iran war would probably draw in like the U.S. and other actors too. That's like pretty sensical. Go to RC2. They make two responses. The first thing they say is that like Tisdale that says like it delegitimized right-wing people in Iran. But remember, they can see this isn't true when the overarching evidence that they read on RC2 about insecurity says that Iran will always lash out and be insecure because of Saudi military spending. At that point, Iran's always aggressive. It doesn't matter like about these right-wings. Second, on like this mutual defense treaty, remember Zain tells you Israel would never sign over like a veto to the United States who just abandoned them. But secondly, like their evidence is like very specific to like any withdrawal Syria disproves. That means you extend the C2, which at that point is conceded. Smith says that Israel views Tehran as an existential threat. For this reason, Harel finds that Israel is scared that the U.S. desire to quit Iraq leaves Iran more room to maneuver. Horwitz furthers the concern is that America's hands-off approach will encourage Iran to attack Israel. For this reason, Horshid finds that Israel's known to take fast preemptive action. That's really bad because the Oren evidence finds that the war can be sparked by like any attack. That's bad because we tell you that as soon as the war is sparked, Tur says it goes nuclear, which kills 5.6 million people. That link is conceded. We would say this easily outweighs on strength of link. There's going to be a lot of like places that you can like not vote for them on their C2. On their C2, start on like just like if we're going to war, we'd say our Cooper evidence that says Trump has no appetite for war is better than their Mudede evidence, because one, their Mudede evidence is from like some random person, but two, we say it's better because right now we're like consolidating troops away from Shia militias, but secondly, we're putting in like anti missile defense systems, which means we're trying to protect our troops, not attack. It's clearly the opposite. Our Cooper evidence is way better, but the turn is also conceded. The Denver evidence, which like supersedes their Jones evidence, says that right now Iran views Iraq as crucial to their survival. At that point, it doesn't matter if they like want to negotiate, because they're going to take over and like influence Iraq anyway. The middle evidence finds the only thing stopping them from going into Iraq and gaining control now is U.S. presence, which Jihad finds goes away as soon as the U.S. leaves. That's bad because one, the conceded sanctions impact from Jihad, which says that as soon as Iran gets control of Iraq, they're seen as like the enemy by U.S. hawks, who then pushed Trump to sanction them, which caused 227,000 deaths. But secondly, the Shia Crescent, which we say once it's formed, Oxford says it destabilizes the entire region and increases the chance of Shia-Sunni conflict, which also short circuits or at least non-uniques their C2.
Okay. I'm going to start on weighing, and then our second contention, their second contention. Is everyone ready? They concede all the weighing as to why U.S.-Iran conflict is going to be worse than Israel-Iran conflict, which means that even if we win a risk of U.S.-Iran conflict in the Sadako, we win the round because they conceded it. Their only response is just that, oh, Israel-Iran conflict is also going to draw in other actors. That's uncarded from our Spinelli evidence. We say that specifically the U.S.-Iran conflict would draw in other actors, and moreover, our warrants are just much better on this. Like, the U.S. has security guarantees across the Middle East, Israel doesn't. So it's a reason why we outweigh. And also, we also tell you that the people in our scenario have incentives to do it. We gave you the clear warranting, and they don't really do it. Like, they don't warrant their case as to why it leads to nuclear war. So we tell you that U.S.-Iran war is happening in the status quo. Our Muderet evidence says the U.S. is preparing war, and specifically there was a Pentagon directive to go and attack Iran. That's really, really important because ultimately we also give you the warranting as to why war happens now. First is COVID. Second is the U.S. intelligence perceives that Iran is launching a massive attack against U.S. troops. They just say, oh, the Cooper is saying it's launching a defensive posture. No, one, they can't tell you that it's launching a defensive posture. Two, our Muderet evidence and New York Times evidence, like post-dates there's, New York Times is Mazzetti evidence, post-dates there's, the U.S. is preparing for war. Like, we just give you much, much better logical warranting as to why war happens now, and Trump has the incentives to go to war with Iran. Then they say that Iran sees Iraq as crucial. But the problem is that, number one, our Matsunaga evidence goes around this because the only reason why the Iran sees Iraq as crucial is because of U.S. hegemony. That's why that's the Matsunaga evidence that we read on their case. Two is we tell you the Jones evidence specifically says that Iranian hardliners are empowered by U.S. policy in the Middle East. So if you take away U.S. presence, then ultimately the hardliners will be disempowered, so they will no longer see Iraq as critical to their survival. Only the hardliners think that. Look at their evidence. It says Iranian leaders do. So ultimately, we're the only team that falls back for nuclear war. But they also really, really mishandled the Tisdale turn that says that ultimately it's going to be more security guarantees and a mutual defense treaty for Israel, which is going to put a veto on them. That's really crucial because Tisdale is specific to U.S. withdrawing from the Middle East, not just Syria. We also tell you that ultimately, like, this outweighs their case because it prevents Israel from launching an attack. And also they say that Israel, like, wouldn't do this because the U.S. just pulled out. But we also tell you that Israel wants, like, more protection from the United States, which security guarantees and more defense treaties would provide.
Good round, y'all.
Okay, I'm in. You want me to announce?
Yeah, go.
Good. Cool. All right. Congratulations to both teams. It is a 3-0 for the con. So, I can go first since, you know, I'm unmuted. First, I want to say, and I don't say this often, so this is probably the best debate I've seen all year. I think it was a really good debate, and I was really impressed with everyone. So whatever that may mean to you. I think that really this debate just comes down to a few key pieces of evidence. It's just a question of which war is more likely to happen and which evidence I'm more inclined to agree with. I think US troops in the region are less likely to cause war. I think they're winning a majority of their contention too. The only extension I really get in the final focus is this Tisdale evidence, but after looking at that evidence coupled with the final focus explanation, I don't really think the Tisdale turn really says everything you think it does. I'm also not really sure what parts of the cards you read or are referencing by the end of the debate, and I'm not really comfortable deciding that for you. I think the affirmative is right that it's probably illegitimate and Syria might disprove. This means that there's a decent chance that keeping US troops in the region stops war. So then if I look at the affirmative case, there are two key pieces of evidence that I think are particularly good. First is the Danmar evidence that indicates that Iran needs Iraq in light of sanctions. I just have the affirmative repeating that they've done it in the past, hardliners, but I don't really have a discussion as to why that interacts with this evidence or why that might be the case. I also don't really think the Jones evidence is as responsive as you think it is. I don't have that really explained. This makes me think they're at least winning some defense on your Iran war contention. I think that coupled with the Cooper evidence means I vote negative. I think the act spends a little too much time on Wayne in final focus, when it's functionally just a question of war scenarios, it's probably not questions of magnitude and probably more of a question of the specificity of the links as well as those warrants. And so I think that the affirmative extensions are just repeating some of the same evidence, which makes it harder for me as well to vote on those arguments.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I saw the round very similar. Let's start on the affirmative flow, because obviously I think that's where I think the weighing question comes into place, because I think there is a technical question to have to evaluate there. So on the weighing, I do think it's fair, and I think Hawken, I think it's true that you might be a little dismissive of it, or maybe you're being what's the word, concise. I don't know which one, but I think I would have engaged a little faster and earlier. I do think they probably do extend cards that there's a likelihood if Iran and the United States engage in a war, maybe the domino effect there is much easier than the domino effect between Israel and Iran. However, I will say, one, if you're not winning, I think any risk and probability, if not marginal risk and probability on a magnitude type impact. I mean, I'm not gonna vote an octafinals of TOC on a risk of Iranian war just because you were the ones who extended generic weighing in the round. Though I think strategically, I understand why you did it. I do think maybe though it's very analytical and very concise, their response that if you're trying to impact out to some sort of a larger scope magnitude impact is because these two actors will bring in everybody else. It's probably not within the realm of inconsistency to say that this will probably happen in the conflict that they're talking about too. So I do think that Hawken undercovered it. I don't think they dropped it, but I don't think it's enough for me for a technical reason to I think overcome, which I think is the overwhelming win on more substantive issues. So let's go on the AF proper. So let's first go on the Iran scenario. So I see a couple of things here, right? Let's look at the Iran's incentive. First of all, I think their Cooper card is very good from Trump's perspective, which we'll talk about. But I think the cards that you bring in the round, even when you drop later on, that they point out indicts it itself. From Nehouse's perspective, there are other reasons why these countries are concerned about their strategic place in the region. Obviously, in this case, it's maybe because Saudi Arabia has more arms, etc. I do think from Trump's perspective, you give me two reasons why an Iran sort of conflict's about to happen. One, the Pentagon directive, and second, the US intelligence. Both are hyper-specific to the sort of operation that's going to happen against a specific PMF group within Iraq. I think if the link chain is from attacking that specific militia to Iran, I think that has to be much better in the round. I understand you also have the boat evidence where apparently Iran challenged us in the territorial waters with their ladders up and they came close, whatever. But I think there's some issues there, right? I don't think I can pull a trigger on Iran scenario for those reasons. And there's hardliners, which I think maybe is probably the closest you get to some sort of, I think, internal mechanism access into war. But at the end of the day, I don't understand how that solves for Trump's side of it. I guess if Iran's sort of the first striker, maybe then that engages in that conflict more, but I never get that analysis. From Trump's perspective, I do think that their Cooper card is at least a little bit better. I also think the Cooper card's rhetoric too. I'm not saying that it's actually that good, but I think the Cooper card at least is better rhetoric than I think the rhetoric you have. Again, I think Hawken, I like some of your sort of anecdotes in terms of analyzing Trump's psychosomatic state. But I think, sometimes you go a little too far. I think the Tucker Carlson thing's a fun anecdote, but I think if you could back that up with a little bit more analysis in terms of there is actually news articles tracking the trend of Fox News shifting its opinion, or more importantly, internal polls amongst, I think maybe Midwestern states or swing states, I think that would be much more persuasive than being like Tucker Carlson said, maybe that was too much, right? I think that gets to a larger picture about Trump's sort of psychoanalysis, but I just don't think that there's an incentive structure that for me to believe from the US intelligence side that outside of a very particular mission within a particular PMF group in a particular region of Iraq, that would engage in full-out war. I don't know why the boat scenario triggers that more. I don't know why hardliners wouldn't be doing that anyways in a sort of a non-unique scenario. So I really don't know how to engage, and I think in the likelihood of this conflict happening. So I'm not sure I can pull the trigger on that at all comparatively. I also think that you kind of undercover the sanction stuff. I do think that maybe Hawken kind of blows it up more disproportionately than they spent time on it before, but I do think they extend it a little bit. I think there's a risk of at least some sort of tension coming about where if what you say is true, there's also going to be this baggage that comes from sanctions that could have a deleterious effect on a much larger scale. So how do I compare that to the sort of the scenario that comes out of Israel? I think this sort of your Tisdale turn saying, look, Israel won't engage in this anyways because when we pull out, we're going to have to add on other security guarantees. I think the response is fairly convincing to say that this is non-unique. Literally, your card says add on additional security guarantees. I don't really know how these security guarantees work, but my guess is the one that's probably already there is if Iran attacks you, we help you. I don't know. I think you have to do better explanation. That's why the existing security guarantees would maybe moot this, or why additional ones would solve back. I think the argument, even if everything you say about Iran is true, is still perception-based. I think they extend the Horowitz evidence pretty well. That analyzes like, look, they're being reactive, and this is something that's actually much more likely. So if anything, if I'm trying to compare what is the tinderbox here, it's probably going to be Israel more than it is Iran, because Iran is acting perceptually, and they have different incentive structures that you don't solve for, I think, in the status quo. So if I'm looking for the most likely scenario, though I don't think either of them will actually lead to conflict, I think the more likely one in this scenario is going to be Israel, and have to pull the trigger for that. I think our third judge has left us, so maybe email her for comments. So unless you have questions for us, just let us know.
Yeah,
Thanks for judging.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all. Have a good night.